Welcome to episode number 131 of the Unperfect Podcast, where I help women experience intimacy with God and fully live the lives they've been dealt. I'm your host, Shelly Sneed, and I have absolutely been dealt a different life than I imagined for myself. So I promise you I'm meeting you here, real and raw, in authentic community where we can grow and thrive in intimacy with Christ together. And in today's episode, I'm going to be giving you 3 biblical truths that you really already know, but you might need to be reminded of. And also 3 practical ways to sit in whatever you're going through with biblical wisdom. So listen in. All right, so last week on the podcast, in episode number 131, Tanner Olsen talked about some deep truths that he's learned along his faith journey and wrote about in his new book. So you can head back to that episode if you'd like to hear our conversation and his beautiful take on biblical hope. But one thing he said that jumped out to me was the fact that we can't really appreciate the highlights of our life without the lowlights mixed in. I just remember being immediately transported back to the year 2007 when my son Silas, he was about 5 at that time, got to enjoy an all-inclusive vacation with our family. But he did this totally riding on the coattails of his little 3-year-old brother, Josiah. So a little context, backstory, and I've shared on here a little bit, I think, that Josiah's early life was a series of medical mountains. He was born at just 2 pounds. He faced extensive medical issues and had a feeding tube and a trach and all kinds of good stuff like that. But by age 12, all his apparatuses were taken out or gone. But his early life was described by the medical community as medically fragile. Now, I'm happy to report he's super healthy now. He's in college as I record this episode at Savannah College of Art and Design in Atlanta. Guys, his first novel just came out on Amazon last week, so go grab it. If you love fantasy fiction, I loved it, or for a young adult or teen fantasy novel lover in your life. But back to the story. So what happened, because of his medical condition, the Make-A-Wish Foundation granted him his dream of riding on a train to meet Mickey Mouse. That's what he told them he wanted. So thanks to this amazing organization, our whole family, including Josiah's beloved nurse, Marcy, got to travel all the way. We were living in New Mexico then, from Albuquerque to Anaheim, California, on an Amtrak sleeper car, coolest thing ever, for a week at the Disneyland Resort. Y'all, they did it right. They rented us a Suburban. They got us tickets to even other parks and entertainment like Knott's Berry Farm and Medieval Times. And so everywhere we went, we carried this skip the line pass that basically gave us celebrity treatment on every ride. And we barely had to wait a moment. So on one particular day, my husband Art decided to take Silas, the lucky older brother, to a water park. And this wasn't part of the Make-A-Wish itinerary. So they were actually waiting in a long line for one of the water slides. And Silas just very honestly looked up at Art and said, "Dad, why are we waiting?" Now, y'all, he'd been living the VIP life for a week. Thanks to Josiah. He had no idea that regular people waited in lines at theme parks. And to this day, part of me thinks maybe that's why we never became a Disney family. Y'all know who you are out there. Because I think once you've had that caviar experience of amusement parks, it's almost impossible to enjoy the lowly peasant experience of waiting, 2 hours to ride a 2-minute ride. But it made me think, I often wish I could take all the easy exit ramps in life rather than go through the harder detours like pain and struggle and waiting and disappointment, all of the things that we know are just part of living in a broken world east of Eden here. And don't worry, I'm not going to tell you, cheer up, everything happens for a reason. Because often that reason is merely the worst part about being human, just that we live in the tension of the now and the not yet, looking forward to that city with eternal foundations that Hebrews tells us about. But being temporarily in the one that's unperfect here. But another reality that I'm zeroing in on today is this. God's desire is to bring us through the fire looking a little more like gold than we did before. So when we're in seasons where we'd really like to skip to the end, we come to this fork in the road in terms of our thinking. Are we going to pine away for personal relief, like a more comfortable life? Are we going to rest in purposeful resignation? Just a desire and resigning to live fully in this moment and wring it out for all it's worth. I'm not saying we shouldn't pray for God to heal or move or comfort. I mean, he tells us to do this and to lift our anxiety to him. But he also promises trouble, right? I'm referring to those seasons that seem to be here to stay for a little while. And we have the choice to go through it kicking and screaming, which is usually my MO, or we can yield to a love that won't let us go. So, like I said earlier, I'm going to take a few minutes today to remind you of 3 things you probably already know, and then give you 3 practical ways to keep them in sight when you want to skip to the end of whatever season you're in at the moment. And sandwiched in between those, like the creamy middle of a triple stuffed Oreo cookie, I'm going to read you one of my favorite poems from Tanner Olsen's new book, Getting Through What You're Going Through, which, again, we talked about with Tanner last week on episode number 130. Okay, so here's what you already know. Number 1, God has this pruning process, right? And it's effective. It's a natural and vital part of following Jesus and becoming more like him. I would prefer an all-clear diagnosis or a better job or a healed relationship. I would prefer those to be the work that sanctifies me. But pruning is often God's chosen method. It's the part of life that actually makes us fruitful. In John 15:5, Jesus tells us all about it. I know you've read these scriptures before, that God often cuts off branches that aren't bearing fruit, but he also prunes back the ones that are bearing fruit so they'll bear even more. So decades ago, my older brother once whispered these very wise words to me in a very frustrating season. He said, if we look too forward to where we want to be, we're going to miss what God has for us now. So true, and I still suck at it. But 2 Corinthians 4:16-18, one of my favorite verses of all time, says, therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Because what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. So remembering that there is a pruning process helps me stay aware that God is at work. And while this season may not always be physically or emotionally pleasant, it can be spiritually productive. Okay, number 2, again, these are truths that I know you know. The presence of God is our anchor. So Joseph's story, we've all read many times, and it's a tough one to chew because this guy went through so much, betrayed by his family, sold into slavery, accused wrongly, forgotten immediately. But there's this common phrase that we see throughout his whole story in Genesis 36 and following, and it's this: the Lord was with Joseph. Scripture hints to us over and over that the presence of God was everything to Joseph. It was that candle still flickering in the darkness. He never gave up on God or tried to skip to the end, except maybe that one time that he asked the baker and the cupbearer to remember him. But we don't see him complaining or cutting corners. And I know this story of Joseph, I'm learning, is so much bigger than just Joseph because it's God's plan to secure the line of Judah for his son to come later. But if we just look at the narrative of what happens with Joseph and look at God's presence there. It reminds me and brings me back to Psalm 91, where God, scripture says he will cover you with his feathers. You will take refuge under his wings. His faithfulness will be a protective shield. The psalmist goes on to challenge us to make the Lord our dwelling place. If you want to hear me go into detail on this passage and this concept of truly making God our dwelling place, head back to episode number 41. It's fascinating, it's funny, and it's practical. But back to Joseph. We don't have to wait to experience God's presence when we're done going through what we're going through. We can trust that his presence with us is a sure thing. It gave Joseph the strength and confidence to sit with what is, patiently waiting for what would be. I don't want to skip to the end if it's going to make me miss out on experiencing God's presence in the here and the now. All right, the third thing I know that you know is our powerful hope doesn't disappoint. Hallelujah there. I'm referring back to Tanner's statement from last week that where he said, hope believes a better day is coming, but it understands that today is not that day. Our hope, guys, is not wishful thinking. It is reliable. It is a proven expectation. It has entered the doors of death and come out holding the keys. G.K. Chesterton said this about hope. The virtue of hope exists only in earthquake and eclipse. For practical purposes, it is at the hopeless moment that we require the hopeful man, and the virtue either does not exist at all or it begins to exist at that moment. Here's the clincher. Exactly at the instant when hope ceases to be reasonable, it begins to be useful. That's so powerful. Hope is a powerful thing. And when our ultimate hope is in Jesus Christ, Romans 5 verse 5 tells us it won't disappoint. Okay, so I hope those reminders are helpful, but let's jump to the creamy goodness of this theological Oreo, okay? There's a fabulous poem in Tanner's book called Don't Skip to the End, and I want to read it to you today. I wish he were here to read it to you, but you're stuck with me. I'm praying that you will receive this as sort of a benediction over your life today. Here's what it says. It's hard to sit with what is when what is not what you want it to be. But let's not skip to the end. Sit with what is and continue to let the light pour in. Some days I want to jump to the good parts. I want to skip the line and get on the ride. I want to hop on the highway and fly through the red lights. Give me the chance to cut a corner and I'll take it, even if I know I'll regret it. It's hard to be where you are when where you are is not where you want to be. But I have to believe there is something for us in the here and now, in the waiting, in the praying, in the trusting. Maybe I won't see what that is until I look back. Most days, I cannot wait to look back. But today, I'll just be right here where I am. I won't try to hit fast forward or skip to the end. I'll exhale and wait. I'll look up and pray. I'll hold fast and trust. I'll sit with what is, because even in this, the light is pouring in. Isn't that beautiful? I'm going to put the link in the show notes for his book, Getting Through What You're Going Through, because you're going to want a copy of it, if not for that poem alone. But before we close today, I want to give you the crowning layer of the cookie, okay? I want to give you 3 practical ways to do just what Tanner encouraged us to do in the last part of that poem, to exhale and wait and look up and pray. Hold fast and trust and sit with what is. So here they are, 3 practices you can put in place today. So jot them down, hang them on your fridge or your mirror this week. Number 1 is practice the altar of today. Okay, this is what many people call Ebenezer moments. In the Old Testament, when God did something significant, his people would often build an altar, or they'd set up a stone of help. It was called an Ebenezer, to mark God's presence in that specific spot. So when you want to skip to the end, it's usually because you feel like God is just waiting for you there at the finish line. Instead of looking for the big miracle at the end, I want you to look for the daily manna and ask yourself, how did God show up in the last 24 hours? All right, so here's the practice. Keep a presence journal. And if you don't want to keep a journal, write it on a sticky, something. Write down one way you saw God's character, his patience, his provision, his comfort. Somehow he showed up right in the middle of the mess. And this builds an altar in your mind and reminds you he is here, not just there. All right, so number 1 is practice the altar of today. Number 2 idea here is identify the micro light. So Tanner's poem ended with, even in this, the light is pouring in. So to stay present, we got to look for the micro light, the small daily graces that have nothing to do with the end of our season or our struggle. So here's the practice. Every evening, write down 3 small things that were good today that would be lost if you had skipped today. Let me say that again. Write down 3 little things that were good today that would be lost if you'd skipped today. It could be the taste of your coffee. That could be mine every day, y'all. I wake up. Actually, sometimes I go to bed the night before excited about waking up to taste my coffee. It could be a laugh with a friend. It could be a sunset, but it trains your brain to value the journey and not just the destination. I'm preaching to myself. All right, third practical thing I want to share with you today, or idea. Change your internal dialogue from when to while. This was huge for me because our anxiety usually lives in the when, those when statements like, when this is over, I'll be happy. Or when I get the answer, I'll be at peace. When I finish seminary, that's where I am. And I shouldn't be because I just started a semester or 2 ago. But this mindset makes the present moment feel like it's an obstacle that's got to be cleared. So here's the practice. Replace when with while. So instead of, I'll be happy when I'm healthy, try, I'm going to look for joy while I am healing. Or maybe instead of, I'll start enjoying my life when I finally paid off this debt, try, I'm going to find free ways to experience joy while I'm becoming financially free. You see how it just changes the atmosphere a little bit with that little bit of internal dialogue, just changing the word when to while. Or maybe instead of, I'll be successful when I get this promotion or this title, try, I'm going to do something like build my skills while I grow into my next role. I know this really sounds like, wishy-washy semantics, but I promise you, when we can start looking at things with a while instead of just when, it really acknowledges the reality of the struggle that we're going through without letting it put our lives on hold in the meantime. So friends, my challenge to you today is clear from the title of Tanner's poem, Don't Skip to the End. There is a lot to grab onto here in the messy middle. You probably know someone who could use this word today. So go ahead and send them the link to this episode. And if you want to bless me in return, leave a 5-star rating to help other people find the podcast too. You can find instructions to do this in the show notes in case you're not as techie as your teenager. I am not. As always, I'm praying that you're able to see glimpses of God's glory in the now and the not yet of your unperfect life this week. I'll see you next time.